If you seek to shape the future, listen to those who design it. Welcome to If You Seek by Usability, where expert voices guide us to UX wisdom. Sotiris Sotiropoulos here, your host on the journey of If You Seek. If you are seeking a different way to learn and understand users, this is the podcast for you. Maybe you are questioning, why If You Seek? Picture is an open door to curiosity. In every episode, we will strive to explore and gain deep insights from experts shaping their domains. We want you to feel enlightened, educated, or even inspired after each episode. The idea is to foster connections within the UX industry. Now, an important message. Step into the future of UX research with Usability. From user recordings to click tracking and user flows, our platform offers a variety of insights for better decision making. Elevate your research game with Usability. Discover more at usability.com. Follow us on social and drop your thoughts in the comments. Today's guest speaker, Sotiris Sotiropoulos, a lead UX researcher with over a decade of hands-on experience. Sotiris has knowledge spanning B2B, B2C, finance, retail, and telecommunications. Beyond research, Sotiris plays an important role in the team education and mentorship, elevating organization research, operations, and foster long-term product enhancements. Currently serve as a lead user researcher at Meta. Hope you're ready with your notebook because this episode of Research Meets ROI will start now. Hello everybody, my name is Sotiris Sotiropoulos and this is a new episode of If You Seek. Today with me is Sotiris. Welcome Sotiris to If You Seek.
Hi, Leishi. How are you? Thank you very much for having me.
I'm doing amazing. Today I'm recording from the beautiful island of Puerto Rico. How about you? Where are you?
Wow, the weather must be great over there. I'm in the beautiful Reading, UK. It's about to rain a lot in a few moments.
I mean, rainy has also a little bit of enchantment sometimes.
Yes, of course, it has.
It has. Well, Sotiris, I hope that you are ready to share some insights.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to share.
So the audience also want to meet you and understand a little bit of how is a typical day as a lead US researcher. Tell us.
Yes, of course. So typically, my job as a UX researcher is within a cross-functional team. So a team formed by engineers, designers, PMs, content designers, data scientists. My day-to-day would be in four parts: planning, conducting, analyzing, and reporting user research. It's quite streamlined, I guess. There are other things that I'm a researcher is typically responsible for, and some of the things that I found really, really useful and continuously happening on every week of my job is to run operations, research operations in particular, creating research material, creating user panels, repositories for every other team of researchers to utilize. Then setting up metrics across different tools and over time measuring and making sure that we're tracking them properly. And last but not least, of course, is the education part, the mentoring part, and the upskilling of the team, both product and development on research approach and methodologies.
Sounds a lot, to be honest.
Well, I can complain.
But one of the things that I can say I'm a little bit jealous is has like an entire process. I mean, I'm a UX designer and I have my own process and my own methodologies. But sometimes because I'm a creative person, I jump here and there and you sound like more structure, like something to follow like completely.
Well, lots of what we do in research requires some sort of structure, especially at the early steps, and also at the analysis later on. But it helps a lot kind of keeping a cadence of continuous research and improving things. So I guess that, as you mentioned, every designer has their own process, and we're all about improving that. So being more efficient and more effective, right?
Definitely. So today our focus is on demonstrating how our audience can utilize research as a strategy to enhance profitability, while always keeping users in mind. I know that is a hard mix. I always try to compare things with things that for us, daily days are like regular, right? For me, when I doing pancakes, I have my own recipe of how to do it. And I have my own recipe of how to communicate like the importance of research with my clients. But I really want to know your recipe.
First of all, you have to teach me that recipe. I have absolutely no idea how to make pancakes. Uh, Now, I wouldn't say there's a recipe per se, but what I see in product development, there's practically a triangle of three main pillars. There's the business needs, there's the user needs, and there's the implementation feasibility kind of pillar. All these three sides need to be represented properly and be evolved at the beginning and continuously to create this kind of impactful experience in the end. My go-to strategy with that is to involve research as soon as possible into these conversations, and in many occasions even lead this conversation, even lead the road mapping with discovered user needs to inform decisions that will be made afterwards. In that way, research is not executed reactively as a request, like what you would do with an agency, let's say. It's proactively executed in order to inform this decision making, to inform the road mapping, and to inform the implementation that will come later on. The best strategy to achieve that is to not treat research as a one-off incident, as a high ceremony event, if you will, but to have a continuous activity of doing research and conducting research within the team process, like the same as design and development, right? It's constantly happening, especially with when the team has a dedicated researcher. That's something that's expected. So a question I always ponder, and ask many of the teams I work with is like, or teams that I don't work with, when was the last time you did user research, and how often was that?
That's a great question, and I think the majority of the companies think about research. I don't want to generalize, but in terms of the industry, they think about research like one time thing in the year in order to just do a check mark of how good we are right now, or if our users are happy with the thing that we are doing. They don't think about that this is like an iterated process that is needed in order to actually do a better conversion, do a little bit more sales, actually understanding the needs and using those needs for innovation. So yeah, completely agree. So that being said, can you share some strategies of how you prioritize user needs while also addressing business objectives? This is another like hard question. But in case of user experience, I always try to humanize the information that I have on my hands, and trying to say to the stakeholders or to my clients like this is important because users are saying this, and putting in their words, and I using their information, their quotes about the entire experience, and showing case how they navigate or products. It helped me to communicate that properly. But in terms of research, how do you do it?
So the important thing is to bring in business stakeholders, designers, and everyone involved in the research team, of course, and the research process quite early on in the conversation. And their needs, their business needs, are actually mapped in the research plan. So the best way to begin with this is to have all the documentation, all the right people in this conversation to make sure that all the business objectives are followed and all the business goals are the ones that drive the research itself rather than executing research for the sake of you doing research.
Thank you so much for that. I think it's super important to highlight the process of doing planning. I currently am working a little bit with audiovisuals, and in some of my clients ask me, can we do a video of 2 minutes? And that's typical in the industry. And I try to prepare myself like 3 weeks before, and in terms of how many lights, of like then understanding the space, even like asking them what kind of clothes they will you using, so the colors, it will have an impact of the way that we use lighting. And when we do the videos, like the video production, it's just like 2 hours, super quick, because we understand already beforehand all different details. And it takes us so much for prepare, but when we actually be in the field, it's super easy to work on it, just because of planning. And in design is in the same case as the research. We need to do a lot of planning in order to execute correctly. If not, we are wasting time that is money.
Yes, that is correct.
Can you provide some examples of usability metrics that commonly used to measure product effectiveness and user satisfaction? We talk about a lot of how we can track success. What are your opinions on that?
That's great. That's really a big part of what I do and my work as a researcher. So experience metrics are highly dependent on the business KPIs, on the business objectives that we were talking about earlier. Um, what we see, what we use, usually in B2B, can be completely different from B2C, right? In some cases, satisfaction, customer satisfaction itself may be completely irrelevant, and something else like mental effort, for example, might be more important instead for the product that we're assessing. To answer your question directly, a very good measurement of product effectiveness is assessing its utility. So, for example, does this product help solve a particular problem or user need for the customers and for users? To dive into this, a very common instrument to do so is Umux Lite, developed by Jeff Sauro and Jim Lewis. I found it really actionable to follow up with users actually afterwards, and not only gather the quant aspect of it, but also to follow up on their responses with qualitative feedback and understand what's driving their predisposition about this. Customer satisfaction itself is a really not exactly problematic, but a very weird metric because I've seen it used in many situations in isolation and in a very arbitrary way, which sometimes it doesn't provide any valid data. Asking about satisfaction, for example, quite in general, might provide vague responses back from users, which are rarely actionable. Again, I found that specific instruments such as the ASQ, the After Scenario Questionnaire, again developed by Jim Lewis, has provided a lot of solid material, solid responses, because it assesses 3 different areas of satisfaction instead of having a generic view on satisfaction, which is perceived ease of use, perceived time, effort, and supporting content, which is very useful. And you can do something with the results. That's the important thing, right? Combining these instruments with others that are user context dependent can help assess the overall experience. These are not, of course, the only instruments that we use. I'm just stating them. Maybe some of the most important, most frequently used ones.
Thank you so much for actually giving us actual tools. I really value that. I tried to do a lot of testing with my clients, and the majority of, as you mentioned, they isolate the questions. Sometimes they say like, can we introduce this and this and this? And it's like, why you want to actually understand from your users? Because, oh, the product is good. Good in what type of a scenario? It's good about user interactions, or it's good because people really like the quality. It's good about what? And you
Yes.
mentioned time consuming. I remember one time that I was having a client, and everyone on the testing, it was saying that the product was good, but when you notice actual recordings, things that are really really small, like tasks that was really really small, it takes 2 or 3 minutes from each user to finalize, and it was like, this is not good.
Happens every time. What people say, what people do, and what people say they do are completely different things, as Margaret Mead always put it. It's really important to have to do continuous triangulation with this and assess both what people actually say in terms of their attitudes, assess how they feel about something, what are the thoughts, and also see how they perform in a particular interface.
Now, let's stop the conversation for a moment. Today's users want personalized and engaging experience across every interaction with digital products, but achieving this seamlessly can be challenging. With Useberry, you unlock the power of user insights in a whole new way. Now, all your teams from UX design and research to product and marketing can collaborate, run a variety of research methods, and gain real user feedback super fast. Empower your team to deliver exceptional user experiences, from the first interaction to long-term loyalty. Ready to transform your UX research? Get started today at useberry.com. Now, I would love to ask you, can you describe your experience or giving us an example maybe of how to conduct user interviews and how you extract insights that inform both things, product design and business decisions? Sometimes we have like our clients or stakeholders that they really want something, and we know that maybe our users, because of the research that we are doing, they are not necessarily need that. How you actually work around this?
Really interesting question. So this is typically a pretty streamlined process. It doesn't have to do with the methodology per se, like specifically with user interviews, but the research questions and the hypothesis that initiated the research. At the end of the day, there are two types of research when it comes to planning ahead and making this business decision: is the strategic research and the tactical research. The strategic research is mainly used to inform business decisions, and the tactical research is used to inform product design. That's the more or less the rule of thumb, if you will, to all that. As a first step, when a particular study begins, I run a series of sessions with my team, the core team and product team and engineers, developers, and of course the stakeholders. And we try to identify the hypothesis. What is it that we think that the product will do? What problem do we think that this particular product will solve? Then we break down each hypothesis into research questions. One hypothesis might be answered with and assessed with 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 research questions. Research questions, I mean, what do we want to learn? Then we have to break them down, each research question, to the study questions and etc. So how are we going to ask this? How are we going to find this out? And this ends up in bigger groups where we can eventually make the decision: are we running a survey? Are we running a usability test? Are we running a series of interviews? So this is a process that usually helps my team and the teams I work with a lot in order to kick things off. It is a very good way to plan things ahead without sticking at the beginning, at the early steps on the methodology, like we're going to do an A/B test for that, or we're going to do a usability test for that. And sometimes these research questions and after a point, things are getting combined into a way to set a roadmap. What I mean by that is you can start with user interviews and then conduct a survey. And after the survey, you take the data and you have a continuous research after that with usability testing with a few interview questions at the beginning. So there's a lot of ways to plan ahead.
You mentioned something that make me a little bit curious. So you mentioned that it'll depend of the type of audience. Let's say audience, like you have your internal audience that are your teammates, are like your stakeholders, and you need to plan around that versus the actual users. What kind of techniques do you use for actually working with your internal clients, with your internal stakeholders?
Yes. As I mentioned earlier, I think that just having their thoughts heard goes a long way. Many people that are stakeholders, they're not like, talking with product folks, friends, and, people that work in IT. I've seen that there's some sort of conflict sometimes. Well, everybody means well. The stakeholders, they do have their knowledge of the product. They do have the knowledge of the business KPIs, and they do have some goals. It's all about communicating this properly and make sure that we're on the same page and we're kicking off a research that will answer their questions. if the stakeholders are not involved from the beginning and they do not participate in the formulation of the research questions, then any research that comes afterwards, any findings and results will be dismissed immediately. And I've seen that in the past many times, and it has happened to me so many times that now I just slap my hands every time I try to do it.
Yeah, so sometimes we really want to jump into the job, not necessarily into the planning. I got you. I got you.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I work a lot with that accessibility, and as you mentioned, it's super important to keep it in mind that research needs to put in from the beginning, and you will have a lot of different specialties that really want to be from the beginning, and it could be hard to manage like different teams, big different opinions for people that are specialized. In my case, I always try to find a common way to put at least the opinions of the people that are important in order to make a product. And this is a technique that I use with my team. It's trying to, if we can not have the time to do a meeting, maybe just put all the comments in a Figma file and trying to check it out before we launch. At least we have something write it down if we don't have the alternative of a meeting. Because it's not that you need to hear everybody because it's like life or death, but if you don't take into account like that particular phase after, it will be super hard to actually add it. So what is your opinion on that? Because it's super hard to put everyone in just in the same page, in the same room at the beginning.
It is. That's true. My go-to strategy to this would be one, definitely documentation. Document as much as you possibly can. Of course, excessive amount of documentation is not helpful to anyone. So just the most important information. Make sure that everybody understands the business objectives. Everybody understands the research objectives. Everybody understands why are we doing this research in the first place and what are we trying to achieve. And then kind of have an iterative format. Sometimes some people might not want to be involved in that process. To give you an example, many teams I work with, they want to be there and observe the sessions while the research is being conducted. Some others, they don't have enough time to do that. Some are really fancy in taking notes. Some others do actually hate note taking. So funny enough, designers really love being there. Engineers as well, because they're like hands-on. They're building something. They are the craftsmen. So practically, they want to see how people use what they have created. And having this iterative process and understand that, okay, some people will be involved at the beginning, some people will be involved later on, and have this flexibility and have the documentation there to mark everything that's important, I think kind of resolves that issue. And second layer of, let's say, safety net that I use for that is after a series of sessions, after the data collection, and after the analysis in all these three stages, I go back to my team and have a debrief session. So everybody's up to date with what's going on, what are the research findings, what are the insights, and again, it's an iterative process.
It's super important to understand how people love to communicate, and I remember of actually talking about education and how people learn from different ways, and for some people, and I have that opportunity, they are really into audio, so voice notes into the files for them is just amazing, but some people, as you mentioned, is they are note takers, so they need to actually write. But doesn't matter the way that it's been selected, is the way that we actually do in documentation. That is the key.
Yes, correct.
I don't know if you have the same experience, but I'm being in different companies where I start doing design, and after when it gets to development, it's really different the thing that it's showing case. In your experience, I want to ask you, how do you collaborate with UX designers and developers to ensure that user research findings are effectively translated, right? you have something that already people are saying, and now is the turn from UX designers and developers.
Yeah, that's true. About what you just mentioned about the design before and after implementation, like half an hour before this session, I was watching a particular meme saying that exactly that point on LinkedIn somewhere, and it had like a very, the actual Captain America, and then next to it, which is before implementation, like the Figma Captain America, and then it's like after that, and it's someone cosplayed as Captain America, and it looked very silly. Um, and it is a true pain point. Every single UX designer I've worked with has had this particular problem in the past. We are there to advocate for that. We are there to advocate that there's a reason that the design is made in such a way, right? There are guidelines, there are heuristics, there's data derived from research. There is a reason that someone made the decision to make that button that big and that color and laid it out in that place. The actual process of collaboration with UX designers and developers is a pretty organic process for me. As I mentioned earlier, everybody is involved from the beginning. There is a complete transparency of the ongoing research and what's been going on. That said, I found that when it comes to the output of research, there's a significant difference between evaluative research and generative research. Evaluative research, practically the result of assessing a solution like usability testing. Um, the output of that is very easy for teams to absorb because it's typically a list of things that don't work, a list of pain points, a list of heuristics, a list of usability issues. It's quite easy for someone who is both designers and engineers to make something out of that. It's a tangible result. The problems begin with the output of generative research, so discovery, interviews, anything that has a more qualitative format and it's not as tangible. And the output of that requires a lot of extra effort and a lot of conversation, both from myself as a researcher and the designers in my team, where we collaborate to distill this, feedback that comes in a user need format and translate it into something tangible for the team to implement. That takes a lot of time. And it improves over time, though. That's the good thing. Like the first time that I go about to begin a generative study with any of my teams, and I try to do that as early on as I commit to that team as possible, is kind of to expose them to the situation and understand how it looks like to have a list of user needs instead of something very, very tiny and tangible about where to place this button and how to name that button. And it helps a lot with informing the roadmap as well.
I really like how you mentioned involving like the entire like life cycle. As I work with accessibility, sometimes people say like, "Oh, this is only in the code." It's like, no, this is also in the UX writing part. So we need content people here. Sometimes is the designer part because it has color contrast, and yeah, developer can actually handle that. But if we actually think about it on the user experience side, we can manage that beforehand. So having like these conversations with research from the beginning and putting people from developing, I think it helps a lot. And this is something that I think it's a myth. Companies think that this kind of thing, this kind of meetings, it takes more time and actually doesn't help because it put more longer the entire process. But the reality is like when you do all these meetings before, after the production phase, it's super quick, super quick. I don't have your experience.
No, absolutely agree. Absolutely agree. We save time by making sure that these things are considered from the beginning.
Yeah, working in isolation never works. Just saying.
Yeah, yeah,
Just
absolutely.
I love when I do a little bit of research beforehand. I don't want to say that I'm a stalker. I'm just kidding, just kidding. But I was in your LinkedIn. I want to be honest. I was on your LinkedIn, and I noticed that you are really advocate in terms of the profession of researchers. And that is super important. So I noticed that you put a post about how companies tend to undervalue the importance of research and how the entire industry of research has been working around companies and profitability. So I would like to ask you if you don't mind sharing some of the strategies that you approach to educate higher ups.
Yeah. First of all, I'm flattered. Thank you so much for reading some of my posts. Uh, uh, Other than that, it's practically, if I understand the one that you possibly mentioned, because I rant a lot, but it's I've observed a particular situation when it comes to UX research, and sometimes with UX design as well. Um, they are considered by some as expensive practices, taking a lot of time and effort sometimes. They're brought quite late to the party, and the request is to do things that have to be done very, very quickly because there is no time, quote unquote. This happens more often in less mature teams rather than mature teams. And by maturity, I mean UX maturity and UX research maturity. Other times, research is skipped completely because it takes too long. Um, my response to this is always it takes too long compared to what? Because business decisions take time, might take weeks. Development takes time, sometimes months. So is this really about timing and delays? Is the problem that research takes 2 weeks and design 4 weeks? If we're releasing something that has value and we're on the right way and we have mitigated risks. My second observation to that is that people are considering this with what Kahneman calls the attribute substitution. So practically answering a very difficult question with a substitute with another question that it's related, but it's different. And the difficult question is practically, do we know enough about our users to release this particular product? Or will this product solve a problem for our users? Because people think that only research can answer that, they go like, we don't have time for research. So they ask the question, do we have time for research? No. Therefore, there's this kind of discrepancy in the logic. And at the end of the day, research is not an expensive sport. It doesn't take too long. It takes just enough to make sure that whatever we're building has a lower risk and addresses the needs that our users have and our customers have. Same thing with design. As we can wait for developers and engineers to develop and create the products that and to write the code practically, we can wait for a few days to discover some things, discover the needs, and ask our users some questions and assess their experience and measure some stuff.
I love when you mentioned that they already answered the questions before they do the actual questions. They are sometimes saying like, we need research? No. I think we have a designer that can do some questions and use some tools. And
Exactly.
and this is a little bit more on a opinion side. But I would love to talk to you about generalize and people that are really into specializations. Sometimes companies prefer someone that do everything. And they don't take into account that people that had a specialization, it's because a reason, right? And so it's so important to add value from your specialization in the correct moment for the company. And companies think that they are expensive or take too much time or there's not the moment for doing that. And the majority of the times past, this happened with research. Do you have any like takeaways on there of how we can communicate like, you know what, maybe UX designers don't need to do the research because they need to actually focus on solving problems in a creative way?
Well, there's always this kind of T-shaped format in my head of how people can utilize their knowledge and their skills. So you can know a lot about a topic and a few things about other topics as well. My background as a UX designer many years ago has helped me a lot to communicate with UX designers right now. And it has also helped me a lot with developers and engineers too. My background in startups has helped me a lot communicating with business stakeholders. So whatever background someone has or whatever knowledge they have about a topic helps them to communicate better and to understand better. I've seen people struggle a lot, especially in software, where they are, let's say, designers that where they were trained in print and they jumped into software, and because interaction was not something that they were used to, they struggle a lot. That's what I mean by understanding more about the one side or the other of your skill set. In terms now of how to improve that, is to talk with more people that are not within your knowledge, but elevate a lot your own knowledge. Like that's what I always try to do, and I always say to my stakeholders, you have the knowledge of the product, you have the business knowledge. I need you. You're the subject matter experts. I need you in this session to explain to the rest of the product team, why are we doing all this? What's the needle? What's the KPI we're trying to move? I'm here to help you find the best way to answer these questions. That's my job. A UX designer is there to provide their skill set and find us the best way to create a solution. Same thing with developers. They're there to actually implement the solution. I cannot do that. So I feel that everybody's needed, everybody's required, and they can collaborate properly within a team. Of course, this is not always easy, especially when we stick too much to, no, this must be done first, or this is a priority, or this is more important than that.
I really like that you bring the concept of T-shape. I was having a conversation with a friend, and I mentioned that people that are at T-shape, they are like the connectors on companies, because they are the people that has enough knowledge to work around different departments, but also have enough knowledge of something that can actually give you the advice on that particular case. And you always need at least 3 or 4 connectors to help your company grow. So I don't want to move too far away from our topic, but I really into the T-shaped kind of person, because
Yeah,
we are in a world that people tend to generalize, but they don't, sometimes they don't think about, like, even your knowledge cuisine or doing pancakes can help you in your actual work.
absolutely. Absolutely. Totally agree with that.
So we almost finalized, but I want to also ask you, what professional advice do you wish someone had given you once you start your career in UX research?
Wow. I think that's my favorite question so far. Because I tend to try to improve my mindset and my process a lot. So I always go back and say, how did I do that back then? Or I have a lot of mentees and I'm going like, what do I wish to know when I was in their place? Um, I think the one thing, my go-to thing, would be to read a lot, and read with genuine interest and read with purpose. By purpose, I mean um, read the material that is relevant to your ongoing research, to your ongoing study. I find it really useful, and I've learned a lot when I watched training videos or read a particular book or a series of articles or talked to people about, let's say, a topic, surveys, and the errors that may surface in surveys, for example. And I was reading that before I conducted a survey study. That's really useful because you constantly improve your process, you adjust accordingly, you go back and forth. You will not solve everything in one sitting, of course, but every single time your process will be better, your research will be better, your analysis will be better, and you become a better researcher. And the practical thing that I found that works for me is that I block time in my calendar at the beginning of my day for 30 minutes to 1 hour to read uh, very relevant research in books and studies and papers that are relevant to the work that I'm doing. during working hours. So the first 30 minutes of my job is reading, because I'm reading to make this research that I'm currently running better. And then I do that for the next one and the next one. And it's really, really helpful way to, get yourself unstuck, first of all, and to elaborate more on your process, be more detailed.
That actually reminds me, when I started my career, I was really into the tools. I was thinking in that moment of my career that if I know really, really well the tools, that will lead me to be an amazing designer. And after that, after a couple of fails, I noticed that it's not the tools, it's actually what you do with your tools. But I remember myself like seeing YouTube videos while I was working because I want to execute this that I was seeing in the actual work that I was doing. Tips and tricks of how to do this in an expedite process in order to be better in the things that I was doing in that moment on the company. And I remember that helped me a lot in different situations. That I remember some of my managers tell me like, "You are really efficient," and it was like, "Well, I'm looking to YouTube videos while I'm working," but it was because of that that I was doing a good job. Do you have any recommendations about books? So because you mentioned that reading is so important for research.
Yes, of course. I mentioned earlier Kahneman, so thinking fast or slow, definitely a go-to situation. Hayes's book for doing psychology research is a very, very interesting book, very well-structured book as well. And I do have next to me, actually, this amazing book called An Introduction to Psychometrics by Colin Cooper. It's the one I'm actually reading right now. It's very good to help with rating scales and go into detail about psychometrics and measure things. So yeah, I'm actually working on this right now. So it's quite a useful tool.
And for people that are listening to us that maybe they are not into books or either into watching videos, this podcast is also an alternative.
Of course, absolutely.
It doesn't matter what are the type of way that you consume the content, is that actual action of consuming the content what is important.
Absolutely, absolutely. I find podcasts and audiobooks equally valuable, especially when with qualitative matters that do not necessarily have a lot of, quants and tables and graphs and stuff like that you only have to listen to. So yeah, definitely useful.
Well, thank you so much, Sotiris, for actually sharing all your knowledge with the audience of If You Seek. If we want to know, I don't know, make you some questions or like just connect with you, what are the ways that are better?
Yes, absolutely. So my LinkedIn profile, I think it's the best way. I'm more than happy to answer, to posts and questions and everything like that. So feel free to reach out there.
And you can find interesting content on that LinkedIn profile.
Yeah, that's good first-hand knowledge. You already have done your due diligence, so thank you for that.
Well, thank you so much, Sotiris, for being part of If You Seek.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for having me, and have a nice day.
It will be to the next one. Bye. Thank you for joining us on If You Seek. For more exciting content, follow us on our social channels. Your review means the world to us, so don't forget to leave one. And of course, hit that subscribe button on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or Spotify to stay updated on our latest episodes. If You Seek, it's a platform for discussions and personal insights. The opinions presented by guests are independent and do not represent the official position of the host, Usability, or sponsors. See you on the next episode of If You Seek.